Well, hello, inspection community. I'm Alan Carson, and today we're going to talk about my top 10 things to do during an inspection that I consider best practices, do's and don'ts, call them what you will. Let's get right to it. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. You've just arrived at the inspection. You've got your client there, maybe your agent, and we've got to open the conversation. And you only get one chance to make a first impression. So this is it. And what I like to do is start with a couple of basic questions to get the client comfortable, get them engaged in the process, and also pick up some valuable information that's going to help you guide how you conduct the inspection. So I'm going to assume that you've done what we've talked about in previous videos, which is to get your contract signed ahead of time. I don't really want to be pulling out a contract and going through it with the client at the beginning of the inspection. I'd love to have that all done because that's kind of negative rules of the game stuff. I want to start with something positive. So the first question we ask is this your first home? And if it is their first home, you're going to conduct the inspection a little differently. And I always think of a home inspection as a 2.5-hour course in home ownership anyway. And if you're talking to somebody who's never owned a home, that's going to be a little different than talking to an experienced homeowner. So it helps you gauge, and it also gets them kind of in that communication mode, because I want the home inspection to be a conversation, not a one-way lecture. So that's a great first question. And then the next question I might ask is, if they have bought a home before, is this your first home inspection? And if it is, then you should probably pause and explain a little bit about that scope of work, about here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking for the big stuff, focusing on important things that might change a typical buyer's mind about a home. We'll also, as we're looking for big stuff, pick up some little stuff, and we're happy to include that as a courtesy. But please understand, this is not a maintenance type nitpicking inspection. We're looking for the big stuff, happy to include some of the small that we see, but that's not our focus. And we're not going to focus on things cosmetic, building code, bylaws, etc. You can cover all of those items off. So if they've had an inspection before, probably spend less time going through that because they probably have a sense of the scope of work, although maybe not a bad idea to touch on it. Okay, the other thing you might ask is, where are you moving from? People's favorite topic is them. And by the way, people's favorite word in the English language is their name. So I would encourage you during the introductions to pay attention to their name. Make sure you get it right. If you have to ask them for clarification, go ahead and do that. And then throughout the inspection, use their name. I think that's a very standard, very typical way to help build rapport and build a relationship. And it also shows a bit of respect from your side, which I think is great. Now, the other question you might ask is, are you planning any changes to the house? And that can be valuable to help, again, guide you through the inspection. What are you going to do? What are you going to try? If they say, well, we're going to tear down the garage and we're just going to landscape the backyard, terrific. You don't have to inspect the garage. Okay, you would exclude it in the report and you're done. Saves you a bit of time. The other thing you might do is, if you've been sharp and checked your work order and you're using Horizon, your work order will document any particular concerns that they expressed about the house when they were booking the inspection. So you will have checked the work order in your vehicle when you arrived, before you got out and met them. And you can say, hey, I understand you're worried about a wet basement. And we'll be absolutely sure to have a good look at that as we go through. And feel free to ask me any questions when we get to that section. So that's respectful, professional, makes you look organized and credible because you're sensitive to their needs. They didn't have to bring it up and ask you again. If they haven't expressed any concerns, here's another thing you can do. I like to ask a question like, is there anything you'd like us to pay particular attention to, or is it just a general overview? And the reason I put in the second part of the question is, if you just say, is there anything you'd like us to pay particular attention to? They typically feel compelled to come up with something. Like sometimes they just feel the need and they feel stupid if they don't have anything they're concerned about. So or is it just a general overview comment, kind of takes them off the hook and they say, yeah, we'd just like you to look at everything, or yeah, a general overview would be great. It makes it easier for them to answer. And I'm going to remind you that somebody buying a house is in a super high stress situation. They are typically not very comfortable with the house they're buying, the process, the people around them, including the agent and sometimes the seller. And your goal is to help put them at ease and take control of the situation. You are the unbiased expert. You are taking control and managing the situation. So part of your role, in my opinion, is to make them feel comfortable. And so all of these questions are designed to do that. Now, I have another question that I'm going to suggest you maybe hang on to, but bring it up after the first 5 or 10 minutes. And that question is, what do you do for a living? And that helps me understand, again, a little bit about their background. By the way, people love to talk about themselves. They're typically fairly comfortable. So that's generally a pretty easy question. And if you can find out that they're an electrician, then you probably don't want to spend a lot of time giving them chapter and verse on the electrical system. So if they're from something completely unrelated to construction, you can assume a blank sheet of paper. So you can take some clues for that from that. Sometimes a lot of our clients are engineers or architects, so you'll know that they'll have some basic understanding. But you should appreciate that engineers, there's no engineering course in house construction or wood frame construction typically in most engineering programs. So although they're engineers and they might be very technical, they still may not know much about houses at all. So you need to kind of keep that in mind and don't assume knowledge. And the same thing with architects. Architects can do brilliant design work, but they don't wire houses, they don't do plumbing, heating, and that kind of thing. So you've got to allow for that. All right, enough of me rambling on about that. Let's move on. Okay, the next point is a pretty simple one, and that is stay in your lane. And by that, I mean you are an expert in a broad number of areas. We have 9 systems in the house. You've got to know about all of them. You're like the doctor who is a general practitioner or a family doctor. You know information about a lot of broad topics, but you don't need to have deep information about all of them. So we have a pretty broad spectrum of work already, but it is still defined. There's a box around it. So when people want to talk to you about alarm systems, smart home setups, codes and bylaws, property lines and boundaries, you need to back off and not answer those questions. When you get questions about materials, what's this kitchen countertop made of? I would be very careful with that. There are so many synthetic materials out there now, it's a little confusing. Here's another couple of questions I want you to stay clear of. Should we buy this house? And do you think this is a fair price for this home? We get asked that all the time. Those 2 questions are a great opportunity for you to turn to the real estate agent and say to the client, well, you've got an expert that can help you with those questions right here. Why don't I let them address that? So you should not be commenting on whether people should buy a house or not buy the house. And by the way, you've got to be careful. If the house needs $50,000 worth of repair, you might say, man, I'd never buy this house. What you don't know is whether the client needs to buy that house because it's the only house for sale in an area. They're in an urgent situation where they've got to move to this specific neighborhood to be close to a hospital because they have a family member who is in need of regular and immediate care. There are all kinds of reasons you may not know about. And so you should not be commenting on whether this is the right house for them or not. Your job is to help them understand the condition of the house so they can make the best decision for themselves and their family. Okay? Let's move on. Okay, the next item is staying in control. And this is kind of related to the last topic, but a little different. I would suggest that you establish, if you haven't already, a very specific process or a flow for your inspection and do it the same way every time. So we start on the roof, then we do the exterior, and we go around the exterior clockwise, and then we walk around it counterclockwise because you see different things from different angles. When we go inside, most of our houses have basements. We start at the bottom, we work our way up, we go into the attic, we come back out of the attic, we do another pass through the interior of the house with the heating or air conditioning system running, and we're focusing on the heat or cool distribution throughout the house. It also gives us a second chance to have a look. It also gives us a chance to look below the plumbing fixtures that we operated on the first pass through the house so that we can see if there is anything coming through the ceiling below. We also have a process when we come up a flight of stairs, for example, from the basement to the first floor, we will typically move in a clockwise direction so that you don't miss any. We'll always follow the same pattern and same routine. And then when you come back around the full loop and you've come back to the top of the stairs, you know you've done everything. So some houses are dead simple and it doesn't matter. Others can be quite complex and you've got to stay oriented in the house. Okay? Now, here's the tricky part. When you're doing an inspection, you might be looking at the furnace and the client is asking you questions about the electrical system or the roof. You can't be answering those questions. You've got to say something like this. That's a great question. Can you do me a favor? Let's get through the heating system here. And then when we get to the electrical, can you ask me that question again? And we'll make sure we address it for you. So you're not being rude to them. You're not saying no. You're telling them, you're validating your question, and you're giving them the responsibility to remember to ask you again later. So you don't have to remember what their question was, but you need to stay in your routine and follow your process through. Otherwise, you're going to get dragged around the house and you run the risk of missing things. Okay, hope that makes sense. Okay, let's touch on lecturing like I'm doing to you now, and with apologies. I said at the outset that the home inspection should be a conversation, and that's really what makes for the best communication. Better communication is two-way than one-way. So I'd rather you not be giving a speech or a lecture or a librarian type tour as you go through the house. I'd like you to be looking at the client's reactions, reading their body language, reading their facial expressions. I would encourage them to ask questions, and I would stop every now and again and say, does this make sense so far? Or is this what you were looking for? Am I giving you what you need? And so getting that engagement, and you'll find that people, again, they sometimes hide it very well, but they're generally pretty nervous and uncomfortable. Your goal is to make them more comfortable, get them to relax so they can focus on what you're going to say. Trust me, they're not going to remember what you said by the end of the inspection, let alone 45 days later when they move into the house. But it's that impression that you're looking to create. You want to be the friendly, authoritative, unbiased expert who is in their corner. The wonderful thing, one of the wonderful things about home inspection is that we get to make a difference in people's lives, and we get to deliver our information knowing that it doesn't matter to us whether the client buys the house or not. Our responsibility is to report the condition of the house in a way that they can understand it. Simple, clear, and straight down the middle. It's a privilege to do what we do. And that's part of the joy of this whole experience. And that's what I want the client to get out of it. Okay. A lot of us who have been inspecting for a while have been in this awkward position. You see something that you're not familiar with. You don't know what it is. You don't know whether it's important. You don't know whether it's part of the house. You don't know whether this is the first one that's ever been installed in any house, or there's millions of them and you just never come across them. No matter what, there is one right thing to do and a couple of wrong things to do. The right thing to do is to say, here's something you don't see every day. I'm going to have to do a little research and get back to you on this. The wrong thing to do is to not say anything about it, ignore it, and keep on walking past it. The other wrong thing to do is to guess what it is and go out on a limb. Never put yourself in that position. It's perfectly okay not to know. And the irony of being a professional home inspector is the more inspections you do, the more comfortable you get with saying, hey, I've never seen this before, I don't know. But let me tell you, even if you're relatively new to the profession, people will respect you for saying, I don't know, I'm going to research and get you the answer, as long as you follow up and do exactly that. And here's a little thing that we're going to talk about sometime later down the road. But if you say, I'm going to research and get back to you, please do me a favor and underpromise and overdeliver. So say, I'll get back to you in the next couple of days, and then get back to them same day. If you can, get that research done, get them the answer. Don't say I'll get you the answer in 2 hours when the research might take you till the next day. You don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. You want to go the other way. So give yourself some wiggle room and then deliver the information back to them sooner than you said you would. Okay. All right, the next point is, again, respecting the client's state of mind. And what I'm going to suggest is sometimes there's a bunch of bad news that comes out from the beginning of the inspection. So I mentioned that we typically start on the roof. So if you get up on the roof, and by the way, don't let your clients come up on the roof with you, different topic, but sidebar. You come down off the roof and man, the roof is worn out, the chimney is leaning, the electrical mast is rusted and in really rough shape. And you go, oh my gosh, am I going to dump all this on the client in the first 5 minutes of the inspection? My suggestion is no. My suggestion is you want to deliver all the information to the client, but you don't need to crush them at the beginning. So I might mention one or perhaps two of the three, but then I would keep the other one in my pocket or the other ones in my pocket, go around the exterior, find something positive to talk about, like the new windows or the relatively young air conditioning condenser. Find some positive news to mix in. And then you can look up at the chimney and say, by the way, I noticed on when I was up on the roof that chimney needs some work, whatever. So blend the good news with the bad so that you don't completely lose your client at the beginning of the inspection. If there's too much bad news, what you're going to find is if it's a couple, they will start to look at each other and go, oh my gosh, what have we gotten ourselves into? And in the big picture, a worn out roof does not make it a bad house, but people tend to overreact because they are so nervous. So I'd like you to be a little bit keeping in perspective mentality kind of delivery, if you can do that. Okay. The other way to lend perspective, if the roof is worn out and you're in a 15 to 20-year-old neighborhood, you can say something like this. As with every house in this neighborhood, because the neighborhood's about 15 or 20 years old, all the roofs are going to have to be replaced soon. So you can have them understand that this is not a problem with the house they selected. This is the nature of the beast. And I sometimes go on to say, houses are a lot like people. Every now and again, we buy new clothes, we buy new shoes. Every now and again, a house needs to buy a new roof and a new furnace and a new air conditioner and a new water heater. And it is not a reflection on the quality of the house. It's just that things wear out, just like your jacket wears out. That makes sense? And that's a really good way to help people understand that the disposable items in a house are not a reflection on the quality of the home they're buying. Okay, let's move on. this is kind of a strange title, use gentle words. And what I mean by that is I think we are in the communication business. I also tell people we are in the solutions business, not the problems business. So we focus on the positive moving forward words rather than the backwards bash the house kind of words. So the roof is shot. Furnace is totally rusted out. This basement is a gut job. The garage needs a bulldozer. Those kinds of things are harsh, negative, and jarring. We tend to carry the conversation right on through to we're going to want to repair or replace the garage. We need to improve. We need to update. Here are the things that we're going to want to do. So we don't focus on the problem and the issue in the conversation. We focus on the approach and the task and the next steps and the actions we're going to take. And so it moves people psychologically to the future instead of being stuck in the past or present and dwelling on the problem. So yeah, we're going to need a new roof. And if you provide a cost estimate, which is a whole different discussion, you can say, yeah, that's going to be a $5,000 to $8,000 job, and we're going to want to do that in the next year or two, something like that. So focus on the positive, focus on the actions to be taken, and don't bother beating the house to a pulp. Make sense? Okay, this is a minor point, and I'm going to touch on it just quickly. If you break something in a home, and if you inspect for long enough, you probably will. God knows I have. I really just want you to go straight down the middle with this and say, tell the agent, tell the client, tell the seller if they're there, I've broken this, I apologize, I'm so sorry. We will take care of replacing it. What I don't want you to do is look over your shoulder, hope nobody noticed, and sweep it under the carpet, literally or figuratively. So it's going to happen from time to time. Just do it right. And a quick note about insurance, which we've talked about in previous videos, you should probably have commercial general liability insurance, which will cover you. So there'll be a deductible. So if it's a small thing, just take care of it. But if it's a big thing, you've got insurance for it. So step up, do the right thing. You don't want to get a phone call after the inspection saying, hey, the seller came home and found that this was broken. It's going to come back. You're going to look like a jerk, and it's going to hurt your credibility. An honest mistake, people will forgive you for. Trying to cover it up, not so much. Okay? All right, here we are during the inspection. We're getting close to the end, and man, there's a lot of things wrong with this house. The client is there, their in-laws are there, the agent is there, everybody's looking over your shoulder. What's he going to say about the house? What is she going to say about the house? So there is a temptation for you to say, things are pretty good, no surprises. You're going to have a temptation to play down things, and I won't use the word sugarcoat, but maybe I should. What there is a tendency to do in home inspection, especially among new inspectors, is be a little bit gentle on the house when you're face to face, and then you recover all your courage when you go to write the report and you are quite hard on the house, and the report is focused on highlighting all the defects. You want to minimize your liability, and understandably so. But you should understand, people are not stupid. People will remember what you said on site, especially in the summary, especially about those important things. And if you are inconsistent, you will pay for it. So tough as it might be, you've got to deliver the goods on site, and it's got to be in exactly the same framing verbally as it is in writing, so that you are consistent. I understand sometimes the news is not good. Sometimes you're going to be focused on providing perspective, and that's okay. But glossing over stuff, sugarcoating stuff is not okay. So it can be one of the challenging parts of our work, but in something as wonderful as home inspection, where we get to do so many great things every day, a little bit of tough medicine you should be able to take with a smile. Okay? All right. This is a related topic, and people say, well, who's really your client? Is your client the home buyer? Sorry, is your client the home buyer? Or is your client the real estate agent who you're going to work with over a long period of time, or so you hope? I say neither one. I say my client and my obligation and my loyalty is to the home. Because at the end of the day, if push comes to shove, your report and your presentation is going to be measured against the condition of the home. Not the client who wanted you to create a really hard report so they could go back and renegotiate the deal, or the next client who wanted you to be soft on the house because they were getting financing from the family and they didn't want to lose that valuable money from relatives. You don't want to be thinking about the agent's interests because they're sometimes quite different from the buyer's interests. And typically, the agent only gets paid if the deal goes through. So you could get some pressure there, whether it's real or perceived. You need to focus on the house and reporting the condition of the house as accurately as you can. The goal of the exercise is to walk away with the client feeling the same way about the condition of the house as you do. If you've communicated that, you have done your job well. Anything else is getting out of your lane, putting yourself at risk. Sometimes it's a bit challenging, I understand, but it is so the right thing to do. And after 43 years, hundreds of thousands of inspections, having made almost every mistake in the book, I can tell you that is a much better way to go. All righty. I'm going to wrap it up for this particular topic, and I will invite you to provide any kind of comments, questions. If you've got some other items to add, put them in your comments. Would love to see them and be happy to give you some feedback. All righty. Thanks so much for watching. We will see you next time.